So Peter is a serial entrepreneur, angel investor, public speaker, and director of FuckUp Nights, New York City. It's not what it sounds like. FuckUp Nights centers conversation around failure and the lessons learned from those experiences. That's a very powerful thing you're dealing with.
Yeah, it is, and it's probably the most important conversation that's not being had right now. So before I get into that, Cheryl and I met the other week, and we were talking about this event, and she was asking me if I'd come and speak, and what would I speak about, and there's a bunch of different points that we kind of hit upon, and it really centered around this idea of failure and what not to do, right? Everyone talks about what to do, but nobody really talks about what not to do, and that's this concept of subtractive approach to success, meaning as an entrepreneur, startup, whatever in life, maybe you have 10 different choices at any given moment. You want to eliminate the ones that you know don't work right off the bat, and you're a little more efficient in going through the process, and statistically, whatever you're left with, you have a better chance of like picking something that's going to lead you down the path you need to go, as opposed to starting with that 10 and trying to figure it out from the other end. So, some of the things that we wanted to talk about were, like networking. I'm often asked, what is the best way to go into a room and network with a high net worth individual, an investor, someone like yourself? Like, how do I meet those people in a sea in a room of people, like an event like this? And it's a very counterintuitive approach that I basically share with them. And it's basically, you go into the room to not network. And what I mean by that is you do not go in there with an ulterior motive. The whole idea of this thing is, everyone talks about authenticity and you want to be genuine or whatever, but how can you actually be genuine if you go in there with a motive or an agenda of any kind? And we are all animals at a basic human level. We're instinctual. That's how we're built. We pick up on a lot of nonverbal cues. Anybody tell you that, communication is 80, 90% nonverbal? That's totally true. So the idea there is that, whether you want to say it or communicate it or not, you're going to do it anyway, as hard as you try not to. So the way to network in a room is to not network. You basically go in there and you have one mission, and that's it. Be friends with as many people in the room as you can. You're not there to meet them for business. You're not there to get their business card. You're not there to find out what they do. You're there to just find a connection. Be a friend to them on some humanistic level. When you start there, it's genuine. There's a genuine common interest. You guys dialogue. Maybe it's small talk at first. Maybe through small talk you realize there's some common interests. Boom, boom, boom. It starts to progress. At some point, you will naturally reach the point where someone will say, so what do you do? And that is your genuine, authentic moment to basically start talking about what you do, or maybe you do that with them at some point when it feels right. But the whole idea is that this becomes a very natural process that you just fall into, as opposed to running up to people and kind of coming off a little, maybe too much. If you're dealing with someone that's approached a lot like me, that's the last thing you want. You just want to meet people just to meet people. So that's one thing not to do. Then I get the question about speaking to mentors. How do I get a mentor to work with me if I'm a startup entrepreneur, right? So the idea here is that you want to get their engagement at some point or another in order for them to help guide you through the process, right? So you're basically going to be asking them for their time, and they have to kind of accept to do that on their own recognizance without any return. Not that that's what they're there for, but you're basically asking to take something from them, their time. So the way you want to approach that is put yourself in their shoes. Their time is really constrained. You don't want to undermine their trust that your request will be that you'll use their time irresponsibly. This is something I kind of run into a lot. People will come up, they want me to mentor them, they want to engage me at some level or another, and then once we start a dialogue, we touch base maybe once, then I hear from them a couple weeks later or a month later, and the more I engage them, or the more value they're getting out of our engagement, the more they want to start taking more of my time. But I don't have that much time to begin with. So I'm trying to be cool with you and nice with you, but they are still wanting more and more and more. And it's a sign, and that's the kind of thing that mentors are usually afraid of, because they don't want the runaway train, right? They don't want the person that you give them an inch, they take a mile, then the next thing you know, they're blowing up your phone, they're texting you every minute, they're sending you email because you're not answering your phone, and then they're wondering, have you fallen off the face of the earth, died, or why are you ignoring me? So, and so, you want to engage mentors in a way that makes them feel like you're not going to abuse that opportunity. And that also starts with a very natural conversation, almost like the networking. You're literally striking up an authentic, non-driven, business-driven purpose conversation with them, with the purpose of understanding if there's any dialogue, interest, overlap, alignment with anything that you're working on. Maybe it's something they talk about, maybe it's something they like or they're interested in, whatever. But that is where it starts. And you need to be really clear up front that I'm here, I'd love to have your input, but I also recognize you have a life, you're also probably very busy, and so you can even state things up front like, hey, I know you're really busy, I'd love your mentorship. Maybe I can hit you up once or twice, once every 1 month, every other month, or something like that. Maybe I can dialogue on the phone with you for half an hour every month or every other month, something like that, where it's on a spaced out interval that becomes a very low ask. And that kind of sets the precedent with them, and they understand, okay, this person gets where I'm at, and they're not gonna, run away with it. So that's a really big one. What about speaking to funders or investors in the media? Well, that's an interesting one too. You have to imagine that investors and media, they also are getting pitched constantly, right? Every day they're getting a million different things. So the first thing you want to do is not try to spin your idea with them. What they need to do is get through your pitch as efficiently as possible to understand whether they're interested or not. And if you're putting all kinds of spin and pitch on your idea, it's that much harder for myself or someone like that to actually figure out what you're really getting at or what you're really doing. So make it easy. Let them, the reporter, the journalist, the investor, decide if there's a story there, and give them the value up front. They'll actually respect you a lot more for it. So give them the value up front, make it really easy for them to decide, because you're not going to have a home run with everybody. You're not going to get everyone engaged that you approach. It's a law of numbers. So make it easy for them. They'll appreciate that, and if they can't help you, they might be more willing to connect you or engage you with someone else that they know that would be, based on the fact that you're respectful of what they have to go through. And that's part of the relationship at some level. The other thing is, if you don't know what you're looking for, how do I? That's a big one, right? So everyone's got this idea, they do a little verbal diarrhea on you in 10 seconds that they catch you in the hallway, and then it's your job to kind of sort it all out. But if you don't know what you're asking for, then how do I even know how to engage you or help you? It's an interesting one. That whole pitch, will you introduce me to investors? That's another one I hear. That's a bit too broad for that reason, right? I need you to be really specific about what it is you're looking for, and that needs to show me exactly what you're looking for, but also that you've done the work to kind of get there, right? I'm looking for an investor in this space, at this stage of whatever. These are the people I've tried before. Do you know anyone else that's in that pool of friends or whatever that might be able to help me? And now it's a little bit easier for me to go, oh yeah, I have a mental Rolodex of all these people that I run into all the time that are also fellow investors or whatever. And now it's a bit easier for me to deal with that. But when you put the burden on me and you say, hey, can you introduce me to any investors? I'm thinking, oh my God, what does that even mean? There's a bazillion investors in New York City, and now the work is on my plate to do that. So I'm going to be less likely to actually engage you that way. keep in mind, my time is really divided. So if you're one of 1,000 people that approach me in a month, and that's not even a off number, to be honest, in some cases, if I have to figure it out 1,000 times for 1,000 people, I don't have any time for myself. So I'm happy to help, or people in that position are happy to help, but we would like that kind of clarity up front so we can make it really easy to give you the value that you're seeking. So that's another really interesting point. And that's really kind of being efficient about it, right? So being efficient, that's probably another one of the coming in towards the end, like one of the next points that I want to share with you, right? So this goes back to this idea of subtractive approach to success. And that works for anything. This works across business, this works across your personal life, this private relationships, public relationships, family relationships, whatever. It's all about this subtractive approach. If you approach everything in life that way and you take off, like I said, everything that you know doesn't work to start, you're immediately in a better place. And you can do, sometimes this is super easy because there's one or two that are probably the wild cards, so get them out of there. Focus your time on the stuff that's meaningful, it makes a difference. So that's kind of a bunch of the points and things that Cheryl and I were talking about. In terms of fuck-up nights, the elevator pitch is this. Every failure has a story, every story has a lesson, and we bring New York City's most inspirational leaders to share their biggest fuck-ups and the lessons learned. And that's the idea. My mother raised me with a saying when I was a kid, and that was, smooth seas don't make skillful sailors. I'll never, ever, ever forget that. Basically, if you do not go through failure, you're not going to learn anything, because that's where the learning happens. And everybody in this room, myself included, have gone through failure. And so the really unfortunate part about this is that society tells us to bury that deep down inside for fear of reprisal, judgment, criticism, whatever. We're not going to be given those great opportunities that we're all seeking. But that's actually the most important conversation. Everyone in this room has something to learn from every other person in this room. You just don't know it yet. And it's digging a little deep and being in a room comfortable enough where you feel open and vulnerable, and you can actually share that story without the fear of reprisal, judgment, criticism, etc. So that's the point of that event series, is to create that environment and then start proliferating that all over the city. So we launched this in April. It's actually a global organization, but we launched it here in New York with my team in April. We just launched the second location in Brooklyn, so now we're doing 2 of them a month. By the spring, we'll have the 3rd in Financial District. By this time next year, we'll have 4, and we'll literally be doing this every single week of the month. And the idea is to make this conversation more prevalent, to have everyone taking place in this dialogue and everyone sharing and everyone learning from each other. And I feel through that mechanism, we will be able to further along the New York City startup ecosystem and community here. It is my hope that other ecosystems like Silicon Valley, Austin, London, wherever, will start to look at New York City and go, wonder what's going on over there. All of a sudden there's an uptick in activity and success and all these other things that are happening, and I'm hoping that it's all this golden nuggets worth of information that everyone's holding back, that they just don't realize the value of and are afraid to share it. So it's also an exercise in learning how to overcome failure, right? So good feedback, awesome. Negative feedback, also awesome. Indifference, get worried. Right? If someone doesn't care enough to give you a response at all, now start worrying. Now start getting the mental craziness, because now you're in a problem situation. The positive feedback obviously tells you you're on the track. The negative feedback is the shortcut to the answer to fix what's broken. So there's no reason to be upset about that. So they're helping you out, literally, and making the job easier for you. So there's really, when you think of it in those terms, there really isn't anything to overcome when you put failure in that perspective. It just becomes part of the process, and it becomes part of the thing that helps you along. So our biggest event of the year is literally tomorrow. It's here in Chelsea at WeWork headquarters on 18th Street. 3 friends of mine are the speakers. That's the format, 3 speakers. And the most high profile of them is my friend David Tate, and he's Richard Branson's best friend, literally. He was the guy that met him in '82. He took him from a record label owner only, helped him create Virgin Atlantic Airways, wrote the business plan, was the first employee, and then helped him build the Virgin Group, and that's what Richard's known for. And they still text literally every week. He's been to the island a million times, all of that. He's been through all of the war stories. He's gonna share some of that with everybody, and we're doing Q&A with the audience as well. I highly suggest, if you, not to plug my own thing, but if you wanna get some really interesting value, come and check this event out tomorrow, and you'll get to meet David, and you'll get to listen to some of the stories. Everything that seems to come out of his mouth is like gold in my mind. So, the name is deceiving at first, right?
Peter, what's the name of the event?
FuckUp Nights. FuckUp Nights, NYC. Yeah. The global organization is FuckUp Nights. We do them all over. So tomorrow is at WeWork Chelsea. WeWork's the largest co-working space in the city for entrepreneurs. It's on 115 West 18th Street. But you can find all the information on Eventbrite. Just search FuckUp Nights. It'll come right up. Or you can go to our website, fuckupnightsnyc.com. Oh, so doors open 6:30. Conversation with the first speaker will begin around 7:15. Do we want to do like Q&A? Or do you guys have any questions for me? As long as they use the mic? Okay, cool. Yes,
okay, Mike, who wants a mic?
Does anyone have any questions?
Because you have to have one too.
Oh, yeah, right. Right.
I loved everything you said. I'd give you a hug if I thought, that would be appropriate.
I'll give you one when I get off stage. How's that?
But seriously, folks, if you wanted to give just, everything you makes so much sense. A 15-second good story.
A failure story? Oh, okay. So I'll tell you about my biggest failure ever. So I've had 12 ventures of my own. I've advised over 120 in the last 23 years. I had an early multi-million-dollar exit at 19. My 3rd or 4th venture was in New York City here, actually, and it was in the fashion modeling industry. So my previous partner and I left an exited startup to TransUnion. We were trying to figure out what the next thing was. We were pinging all of our friends for ideas, and my partner Brent goes, "Hey, my buddy Bo, he's a fashion model at Ford. He's been there for 8 years, and he's got this cool nonprofit called Model Life, and he wants to take it to the next level. Do you think you'd be interested in that?" Now, this is a question being posed to a single 25-year-old guy with a 26-year-old single partner, and we're going, duh. And so we jumped into that, started building a business model and a revenue stream behind it and everything. And because Bo had started this thing prior to us getting involved, he already had the domain name, he already had all the assets set up. And Bo, unbeknownst to us, was blowing off GoDaddy renewal notices. Part of it was my fault, quite honestly, because I was the CTO and I probably should have taken those assets from him, but we were running so fast and not really focused on the T's being crossed and the I's being dotted. He's blowing off all of these renewal notices, and so we've got like major fashion houses in the city looking at our website, talking to our company. We've got major fashion modeling firms looking at our stuff, potential investors looking at our stuff, and the models themselves. And if you know anything about the fashion industry, specifically the modeling industry, they're very, very sensitive to legitimacy and the BS angles of things. And one day we wake up and instead of our website being there, it was an advertisement for a porn website. So, so a 19-year-old kid in Canada ended up buying the domain name out from under us and put up an advertisement, I'll never forget this, for Kara's website Playhouse, And so usually when you talk about startups ending, it's a dwindling, dissolving kind of process. You know, there's a bunch of different things that happen, and it slowly falls off until someone pulls the plug. This is the only time I've ever seen in my entire career a startup go straight up to the wall and just stop. Right? We're running, and then boom, it's done. Because how do you explain that to anybody? You know, however you explain it, it's gross negligence on our part, and we just compromise legitimacy of this whole thing. And if they were associated with it, what would that reflection be on them? I mean, it was horrible. So that was probably one of the few times in life that I actually locked myself in a room for a small period of time, going, what did we just do here? And so we lost a lot of money. We lost a lot of time invested in that idea. We had a lot of answering to do that we didn't really have the answers for. That was Model Life was the name of the business. Model Life. Modellife.com. We had a 1-800 number called 18 Model Life, which was also a domain we owned. Yeah, it all went crashing to nothing, like overnight in the early, just after the millennium.
What's the most consistent fuck up you see within, New York City startups?
Oh, all right, cool. So that's there's a bunch, but the one I like to zero in on when I get that question is, let's back up one fraction here. So a lot of people say to me, based on all the achievements I've had in my career, they're like, oh, you're so lucky. You've been so lucky. Oh my God, I can't believe how lucky you've been. And that kind of burns me up a little bit because it almost discredits all the work that goes into it. But what I've ended up developing was a mantra behind this, right? And the mantra is, there's no such thing as luck. There's actually 3 steps to luck, and when you quantify it in 3 steps, it's really just a lot of hard work. So the 3 steps are, and this will get to the answer for you. First step is being in the right place at the right time. We all make that decision every single day of our lives. We just don't comprehend it consciously that way. You know, maybe we'll use a really crazy example. Maybe you're up late at night, 2 o'clock in your apartment. You get a bug for Ben & Jerry's. You go down to the corner store to get your pint of Ben & Jerry's, and you realize Powerball is 500 billion. Maybe it's a good time to buy a ticket. But you made a decision. You put yourself in an environment where you're either consciously or unconsciously likely to be put in front of other opportunities. When you go to an event and network with people, that's being in the right place in the right time, right? It's making the decision to go there because you know you're going to be serendipitously serenaded or bombarded with connections that you wouldn't otherwise have met. So be in the right place, make the decision to be in the right place at the right time. Second step, this is the big one where most people screw it up, is recognize you're in the right place at the right time. So that's being really wide-eyed and really self-aware of yourself and everything else around you to understand what's really going on and what's being presented to you. A lot of people are given great opportunities in life, and it passes them by because either A, they're ignorant to it or oblivious to it, or the next step that I'll explain, which is step 3. Step 3 is, once you have been in the right place at the right time and you recognize you're in the right place at the right time, you now have to have the wherewithal to do something about it. A really easy example of this, which is oversimplified, is maybe your favorite store to shop at is Nordstrom's. You don't save any money, and all of a sudden tomorrow Nordstrom's has a 90% off everything in the store sale. Kind of sucks. You know, you would love to take advantage of all that, but you just don't have the money in your bank account to take advantage of the opportunity. So when you put all these things together, right, being in the right place at the right time, recognizing you're in the right place at the time, and then doing something about it, that's really what everyone in life will tell you makes you lucky. But really, it's a lot of work when you think about it. It takes a lot of perseverance, takes a lot of persistence, takes a lot of awareness. You really need to, look at what's going on. You can't evaluate everything on first blush. I know that's like, I'm from this area. My mother's side of the family, they're all New Yorkers that grew up here during the Great Depression. Like, I know, it's a habit in New York City with the pace that things are going. You're trying to make decisions quick because there's lots of opportunities. So you're trying to compress all of that. But that is almost working against you in some ways because you can't really ever know the value of anything until you at least take a first step to understand it a little deeper. So that's really important. But that's the thing. Most people don't recognize what's in front of them when it's there, and most people don't know how to take advantage of it if they do recognize it's there. And those are probably the biggest or the largest amount of the mistakes, to be honest. I mean, there's probably a couple other things I could throw in there, but overarching, that's probably the biggest. Anybody else? All right. Thank you.
Really well done. That's really well done. So many good things in his speech, and the one that I keep returning to, because people often ask me, as a singer, as a speaker, even I was talking during the previous break, how is it I speak without and in between different words? And I had to think about it, because I don't know, but I think it boils down to fear. Like, I learned early on, as a young person on the stage and all the way coming up, that making a mistake does not ruin what you're doing. In fact, some of the greatest music of all time, the biggest jazz album of all time is Miles Davis' Kinda Blue. And there are squelchy notes in it. Like, he was not afraid of allowing imperfection in his music. And when you hear Motown, by today's standards, it's out of tune, but that makes it better. The little imperfections that we have in the way in which we present ourselves make us more human. And yet, if you're constantly worried about making an error, you do far worse than just putting yourself out there and going for it. I have a couple examples from my own life. One of the most memorable was in the early days of my professional band, the House Jacks. We were on Mornings on 2, the biggest morning show in San Francisco. Million people watching live, and we were going to sing Elton John's Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting. And I had the first verse. And we had won competitions with it. I'd sung it. I knew it. Cameras are up, go. And I'd never get stage fright. It wasn't anything like that. It's just the song started, I step forward to start singing, and the lyrics are gone. I don't know where they went, but they were not in my brain. And it's not like you can say, ooh, wait, hold, but it's going. So, yeah, I know that's like terrifying. You get a pit in the bottom of your stomach and your butt cheeks clench up just thinking about this, right? What did I do? I just went. I was just making up words and riffing, and Saturday night, yeah. And after the whole thing was done, it threw back to the people, and that was great, well done, house checks, whatever. And I turned to the other guys, I was like, and they were all like, yeah, high five, that went really well. And I was like, did you guys notice anything about that? And they were like, no, it just sounded great. You were great, everybody's great. And I realized, number one, everyone else in my band is an idiot. And number two, people can't tell. Like, most things that we're so worried about people exposing end up not being a problem. And so by not letting the fear stop me, I went from like an oh my God moment for everybody in the audience to just like, yeah, he's just up there having fun. Another one was on tour in Germany. We were performing up in northern Germany, and about 2/3 of the audience was a big company party. And we were about to say, okay, our next song is, and someone in the audience yells out, Jerry Lewis, Great Balls of Fire. And we were like, no, that's not the song. We don't do that. Our next song is, and someone else yelled out like, I Feel Good, James Brown. And we were like, no, but we need to keep these drunk people happy. So we just started singing it. And then when we were done, we looked at each other and we were like, hey, we just improvised a song live on stage in front of people. And it worked. And the audience went nuts. And what we began to do was derive and create a part of the show where we just took requests from the audience. Now, in a piano bar, it's not that big a deal. You've got one person playing different keys. In a rock band, garage band, 3-chord song is not a big deal. But in an a cappella group, each person can only make one note at a time. So we have to constantly be listening to other people. And someone steps forward with the lyrics, and someone's beatboxing, and yet we made it work. And what I learned early on is that when we go up there to improvise songs, if we do it perfectly time and time again, the audience's interest and applause starts to go down. But when we messed up, then the audience went nuts. And I realized it's almost like when you see those improv comedy shows or Carol Burnett and someone cracks someone else up, and then it's twice as funny. You're in on the whole experience. People need some small measure of imperfection to be drawn into it, to realize what the stakes are. So there is a possibility that things can become too polished. And what we love about live art, live music, is that humanity. So the reason I'm telling you all this is to make sure that you know that your biggest enemy is fear. Fear of pitching, fear of making a mistake, fear of screwing up, fucking up, fuck up nights. You got it. The best lessons you'll ever learn are when you make huge mistakes. That's when you take those big leaps forward, exactly as he said. So just know that. That's your enemy. The fear, not the mistakes. Anyway, enough of my yapping. It's time now for tea and or